The room seemed to shrink as Leo's words lingered in the air. Sarah stood rooted to the spot, her mind struggling to decode what she had just heard. Daniel, her dependable, steady husband, had been hiding something from her. Something big enough that Leo felt compelled to break a promise and bring it to her himself? "Sarah?" Daniel said softly, taking a step toward her. "Please, don't jump to conclusions." She instinctively stepped back, not out of anger, out of fear. "Then tell me what's going on," she whispered. "Right now." Daniel looked at Leo with a mixture of frustration and resignation. Leo took a deep breath, bracing himself. "I didn't want to say it like this," he began, "but I can't keep watching this happen." Sarah's heartbeat thudded in her ears. "It started a few months ago," Leo continued, "at his company. There was an internal investigation, something about financial discrepancies in the department Daniel supervises." Sarah blinked. "Financial discrepancies? What does that even mean?" Daniel rubbed his hands over his face. "It's complicated." Leo didn't wait for him to continue. "They found missing funds, large amounts, and because Daniel was the department head, he was automatically implicated." His voice was steady now, though his eyes were filled with regret. They questioned him, repeatedly. Sarah felt everything inside her sink. "You're saying Daniel is involved in stealing money?" "No," Daniel answered instantly, stepping forward with desperation. "No, Sarah, listen to me. I didn't take anything, but the investigation is real, and it's serious." "Then why didn't you tell me?" Her voice cracked as she asked the one question that weighed heavier than the accusation itself. Daniel looked away, ashamed. "Because I didn't want you to worry. I thought I could fix it before it ever reached you." Leo shook his head. "They're close to naming him responsible, Sarah. That's why I came. He's being set up, I'm sure of it, but he kept insisting he could handle everything alone." Daniel shot Leo a frustrated glare, but didn't deny it. Sarah sank slowly into the nearest chair, the strength draining from her legs. "So you've been going through all of this, and you said nothing?" Daniel knelt in front of her. "I didn't want to drag you into something so ugly. I was ashamed. I was afraid of what you'd think. I kept convincing myself I'd clear my name and spare you the stress. But you didn't. Instead, I've been living next to someone carrying a secret big enough to destroy our lives." Leo stepped back, giving them space, though guilt flickered across his face. "I shouldn't have waited this long to tell her," he muttered, but the truth needed to come out. Sarah pressed a hand to her forehead, overwhelmed. The peaceful evening she had carefully planned was now unraveling into something dark, frightening, and irreversible. Daniel stayed beside her, his voice shaking. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I should have trusted you with the truth." And in that moment, Sarah realized this wasn't just about missing money or accusations. It was about trust. Broken trust. And the painful path toward reclaiming it, if that was even possible. The weight of the revelation settled over the dining room like a suffocating fog. Sarah could barely breathe. She stared at the table, at the candle she had lit, the dinner she had carefully prepared, all of it now tainted by the truth she never saw coming. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of her chair, grounding herself as her mind spiraled. I need a moment," she whispered, rising slowly to her feet. Daniel stood too, reaching toward her. "Sarah, please, let me explain everything." But she gently pulled her arm back. "No, not right now." She walked into the kitchen, leaning against the counter as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. The silence behind her felt deafening, broken only by the faint clink of Leo shifting uncomfortably in his chair. A moment later, Daniel followed, stopping in the doorway like he didn't know if he had the right to come closer. "Sarah," he said softly, "I'm sorry. I never meant for it to come out like this." She turned to him, her eyes wet, shining with hurt. "You lied to me. For months." "I didn't lie," he protested quietly. "I kept something from you. I thought I was protecting you." She shook her head. "That's still a lie, Daniel. A lie by omission." His shoulders slumped, and for the first time, Sarah saw the depth of exhaustion in his face, the toll the situation had taken on him. But that didn't erase the ache inside her. "Why didn't you trust me enough to tell me?" she asked, her voice cracking. Daniel took a deep breath. "Because I didn't want you to see me as a failure, or worse, as someone who might have done something illegal. When the investigation started, I thought it was a misunderstanding, something I could resolve privately. But the longer it dragged on, the worse it got, and the more ashamed I felt." Sarah looked down at her hands. "And Leo? When did he find out?" "He overheard a conversation I had with my supervisor. He asked questions, and I told him not to get involved." From the living room, Leo's voice drifted in, wavering with guilt. "I couldn't stay out of it, Sarah. I saw him falling apart, and I was scared for both of you." Sarah closed her eyes, overwhelmed by emotion. Hurt, betrayal, fear, and a strange, reluctant compassion. She wasn't angry because she believed Daniel was guilty. She was angry because he carried this burden alone and shut her out from the struggle they should have faced together. "Do they think you stole the money?" she asked softly. Daniel swallowed hard. "Some of them do, some of them don't, but the final decision is coming soon." "And if they blame you?" His voice barely rose above a whisper. "I could lose my job, my reputation, everything." Sarah felt tears spill down her cheeks. The future she thought was secure now felt fragile, uncertain. Leo stepped into the doorway, his expression tight with worry. "Sarah, I'm sorry I dropped this on you like a bomb. I just didn't know what else to do." She wiped her tears, trying to steady her breath. "I need to understand everything, all of it, but not like this, not with all of us standing in doorways." Her voice steadied, even though her heart still shook. "Tonight changed everything, and now I need to decide what happens next." The room fell into a fragile quiet, one filled not with anger, but with raw, painful truth. A truth they could no longer hide from. The house felt strangely still after the storm of revelations. The candles on the dining table had burned low, flickering weakly as though exhausted from everything they had witnessed. Sarah sat on the couch, hands folded in her lap, staring at the space between her feet. Daniel sat beside her, close but not touching, giving her the room she needed while silently begging for forgiveness. Leo lingered at a distance, leaning against the wall, guilt etched into every line of his face. After a long silence, Sarah finally exhaled. "I want the truth," she said, her voice steady but fragile. "All of it. No more hiding, no more protecting me from things I have a right to know." Daniel nodded slowly, and then, for the first time since dinner began, he opens up fully. No hesitation, no shortcuts. He told her about the first hint of trouble at work, how a minor discrepancy in the department budget spiraled into something much darker. He explained how someone manipulated digital records to point toward him. He revealed every meeting, every accusation, every time he had been questioned. His voice cracked when he admitted how ashamed he felt, how terrified he was of losing everything he had built, and how he feared Sarah might look at him differently. "I wasn't hiding it because I doubted you," he said, his eyes glistening. "I was hiding it because I doubted myself." Sarah looked down at her hands. The truth still hurt, but hearing the truth, hearing the pain behind the silence, softened something in her heart. When Daniel finished speaking, the room fell quiet again. This time, the silence felt less like a wall and more like a doorway, an opening to something new. Leo stepped forward, rubbing the back of his neck. I know I caused a lot of chaos tonight, but Dan needed help, and you deserved honesty. Maybe I didn't go about it the right way, but I couldn't let him drown alone. Sarah stood and walked toward Leo. For a moment, he looked like he expected her to yell. Instead, she placed a hand on his arm. You did what you thought was right, she said gently. Thank you. He blinked, surprised, then nodded. Sarah returned to Daniel, kneeling in front of him. I'm still hurt, she admitted. I'm still scared, and I don't know what's going to happen.
Sarah had been looking forward to this evening all week. After months of chaotic schedules, late-night work calls, and barely exchanged conversations, tonight was supposed to be just for her and Daniel, a simple, quiet dinner at home to reconnect. She had even gone the extra mile. Fresh rosemary chicken in the oven, vegetables simmering on the stove, candles placed carefully on the table. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it felt meaningful, a moment of peace, a return to normal. She was just finishing the salad when she heard the front door open. Daniel stepped in, looking tired but smiling. Smells amazing, he said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. She felt her heart warm. Finally, a moment that felt like the two of them again. But the warmth only lasted a few seconds. Oh, by the way, Daniel added casually, Leo's coming for dinner. Sarah froze with the salad tongs in midair. Leo? Tonight? Yeah, he called while I was driving home, said he's in the area and wanted to stop by. Sarah forced a smile, but inside she felt a small wave of frustration. It wasn't that she disliked Leo, far from it. Daniel's younger brother had always been charismatic, funny, and full of energy, but he was also unpredictable, someone who swept in and out of their lives with barely a warning. He wasn't a bad person, but he brought chaos with him like a shadow. And tonight, of all nights, she had hoped for something calm, something just for them. But still, she swallowed her disappointment. Okay, she said softly, I'll set an extra plate. Daniel didn't seem to notice her forced cheerfulness. He headed to the bedroom to change while Sarah adjusted the table. As she placed the third plate, she couldn't shake the strange heaviness settling in her stomach. It wasn't just irritation, it was something else. A feeling she couldn't name. The doorbell rang sooner than she expected. When she opened the door, Leo stood there, hands in the pockets of his jacket, looking less confident than usual. His shoulders were tense, his smile weak. Hey, Sarah. Hope I'm not crashing anything important. His tone was off, subdued, nothing like his usual bright presence. It made a shiver run down her spine. Not at all, she replied, stepping aside to let him in. Come in. As Leo entered, he cast a glance toward Daniel, who had just returned to the living room. Their eyes met for a moment, longer than normal, heavier than casual. Sarah noticed it immediately. There was something behind that look, something unspoken, something uncomfortable. But before she could ask, Leo dropped into a chair and muttered almost to himself, "Thanks for having me." Sarah nodded, but her mind was already racing. This wasn't a casual visit. Something had brought Leo here tonight, something he wasn't saying. And as she returned to the kitchen to finish the meal, she had no idea that this unexpected dinner guest was about to unravel the quiet evening she had hoped for and change everything she thought she knew. Dinner began with the quiet awkwardness that Sarah immediately felt but couldn't quite interpret. Normally, whenever Leo visited, the energy shifted into something loud and playful. The brothers would crack jokes, tease each other, arguing good humor, filling the house with a noise that was sometimes exhausting but always genuine. But tonight, everything felt off, unnaturally still. Leo sat stiffly at the table, shoulders hunched as if trying to make himself small. His fingers tapped against his glass, restless and unfocused. Sarah noticed he hadn't even taken a sip of water, despite asking for it as soon as he arrived. His eyes darted around the room, landing everywhere except for Daniel. And Daniel wasn't acting like himself either. His usual calm was replaced by a heavy, distracted silence. He chewed slowly, staring at his plate as though he wasn't tasting the food at all. Sarah cleared her throat, breaking the tension. "So, Leo, how's everything? Work? Life?" His head snapped up, and for a brief second, she saw a brief flicker of panic in his eyes. Yeah, fine. I mean, busy." He waved his hand in a vague gesture, as if brushing away the details, but his voice cracked at the end, betraying whatever he was trying to hide. Daniel shifted in his seat. "You didn't say much on the phone," he said carefully. Leo's jaw tightened. There wasn't much to say. That was a lie. She could feel it. It hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Trying again, she asked, "Are you staying nearby? You said you were in the area, right?" Leo swallowed hard. "Yeah, kind of. Just passing through." His words were technically answers, but every one of them felt incomplete, like he was tiptoeing around landmines they couldn't see. The silence that followed was painfully thick. Sarah forced a calm smile and passed the bowl of roasted vegetables to him. "Here, have some more." He took the bowl but stared at it for a long second before muttering, "Thanks," and spooning a small serving onto his plate. As he placed the bowl down, Sarah noticed his hands trembling, just slightly, but enough for her heart to skip a beat. Leo was nervous, not just uncomfortable, nervous, afraid even. That's when she realized Leo wasn't avoiding eye contact with her. He was avoiding Daniel. Suddenly, every unusual detail clicked into place. The tense posture, the clipped answers, the strange weighted look the brothers exchanged earlier. Something was wrong between them. Something big. Daniel finally broke the silence. "Leo, are you going to tell us what's going on?" His tone wasn't angry, just exhausted, as if he had been carrying the weight of this conversation for too long already. Leo pressed his lips together, staring down at his plate. For a moment, Sarah thought he might cry. I will," he whispered. "But not here. Not yet." The fear in his voice made Sarah's skin prickle. Whatever he needed to say wasn't an ordinary thing. It wasn't family gossip or personal mistake. It was something that could shake the entire evening or their entire lives. And Sarah felt, deep in her chest, that the dinner she had hoped would bring them peace was slowly turning into the beginning of a storm. The tension at the table had reached a breaking point long before anyone touched dessert. The untouched slices of pie sat between them like silent witnesses, capturing the strange electricity humming in the air. Sarah could feel her pulse in her fingertips as she quietly gathered a few plates, trying to distract herself from the mounting dread. That's when Leo abruptly pushed back his chair, the legs scraping sharply against the floor. The sound jolted Sarah's nerves. "I need to talk," Leo said suddenly. His voice was firm, but the tremor beneath it was impossible to miss. Daniel let out a slow breath, one that sounded like he had been carrying the weight of this conversation for too long already. He stood up slowly, rubbing his forehead. "Leo, this isn't the time." Leo's expression tightened. "There is no right time, and you know that." Silence fell again, but this time it was heavier. Something inevitable was unfolding, and none of them could stop it. Sarah watched as the brothers stepped out onto the small balcony, the sliding door whispering shut behind them. She stayed in the dining room, pretending to tidy up, but unable to tear her eyes away from their silhouettes. Their voices were muffled by the glass, but fragments broke through the quiet. "You have to tell her. This isn't your decision. She deserves to know."
I said I'd handle it. No, you keep saying that. The more she strained to listen, the more her heart pounded. Every word she caught sounded like a crack in the foundation of her life. Her hands stopped moving altogether as she stood frozen, listening to the tension escalate. Then suddenly, the arguing ceased. Silence. A long, terrifying silence. When the balcony door finally slid open again, both men stepped back inside, but everything about them had changed. Leo's face was pale, his eyes red around the edges as if he was fighting back tears. Daniel looked defeated, shoulders slumped as though he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Sarah took a cautious step toward them. "What's going on?" she asked quietly. Daniel opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His throat bobbed as he swallowed, struggling to find the words. Leo stepped forward first. "Sarah, I'm sorry," he said. His voice cracked on the last word. "I didn't should be the one to say this. But he won't. And you need to know." Daniel's eyes shot up, filled with fear. "Leo, don't!" But Leo didn't stop. The weight inside him was too heavy to hold any longer. "I didn't come here just for dinner. I came because I found something. Something about Daniel. Something he's been hiding from you for months. I begged him to tell you, but he didn't." Sarah felt her knees weaken. Daniel finally spoke, voice barely audible. "Sarah, please, let me explain."